Hey, folks, get comfortable, put your feet up, because this watch gets weird. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Weekend Watch Repair. My name is Adam. Thanks for coming along. Well, if it wasn't evident by the intro you just watched and the thumbnail of this video, this watch is weird. This is a Croton Aquamatic. I'm completely guessing, time frame wise. I'm betting it's from, I don't know, mid to late 70s. Complete guess on my part. I really do not know. But I saw this watch on eBay 6 or 7 months ago, and I just liked it. You know, it's quirky, it's weird. It's got the crown at the 6 o'clock position. It's a UFO style case, so the hidden lugs. I liked the red dial, and I just thought it was a cool watch, so I picked it up. Thought it might make for an interesting project. I had not even looked at the condition of the watch. The photos actually were pretty poor. I actually just recently went back and looked at the order info for when I bought this watch, and the photos were actually quite poor. I got this watch in, threw it in a drawer, and honestly forgot about it for a while. So after this last project that we just completed, that Bulova, I was going through my project drawer and I pulled out 8 watches trying to figure out which one to do next. So I took a couple photos, I threw them on the Patreon page and asked the folks there to vote on which one they'd like to see next. And so patrons and the free members of Patreon as well that are on that page, I sent it over to them and they voted, and it was a close race, but this one won by a couple votes. So this is the watch we're doing. So yeah, and I tell you what, in full truthfulness here, I had not opened up this watch and really even inspected it too much. But it's nice on the outside, but I really never gave it the good once over. Real quick here, we're putting this thing on the time grapher just to kind of get a starting point. And actually, this is not bad. I mean, we could bump that rate up, maybe fix a little beat air, and this watch would probably run okay. It's due for a service. That amplitude's low for what this watch should be doing, but it's in great shape. That blue tape you see on the back of it, that's actually the factory protective sticker on the back of the watch. I mean, you could tell this thing looks like it hadn't been worn. On the outside, there's a few scratches on it. The crystal's in kind of rough shape, but the case is in phenomenal shape. And I could tell you, without hesitation, this is probably the nicest condition, best condition watch that I've ever bought off eBay. It really was. And I didn't really know that until I really got into it. But as we start to disassemble this movement, this is an AS 1903. It's a good quality Swiss-made movement. They sold them to a lot of watch manufacturers back in the day. These things just run and run. And, it's pretty common. We've had 1 or 2 AS movements on the channel before. But, yeah, this thing's in great shape. So we'll get into this. We took the oscillating weight off there, and you can see that gear on the bottom side that turns the automatic winding works. Now we can go ahead and remove our crown. We release the setting lever screw, and now we can go ahead and pull the crown out. And it's always an adventure trying to replace those gaskets in these waterproof type crowns that you see like this one here. If I can ever figure out a way to film it where my hands are just not completely in the way, because it's quite an operation to do. I'll go ahead and film that. I was not successful at doing that on this watch, but we can go ahead and remove the movement ring, and that's a real tight fitting movement ring, which is a good thing. Now we can go ahead and pop this thing out, and that movement and dial sit way deep in that case. You can see how far down that thing's sitting when it comes out of the watch, but we can go ahead and decase this thing and take a look at it. And there's a few little, you can see that white spot. That's a speck of dust or something on the dial, but up real close, you can see just the tiniest bit of spots on the dial. I'm not even going to attempt to try to remove those because any attempt would bear worse results. So we'll leave that alone, but we pop the crown back in it and line the hands up so we can go ahead and get those removed. The hands do show their age. It's likely that this case was not fully waterproof. All jokes aside from the name of the watch, Aquamatic, but I think a little bit of moisture may have got in there, just the tiniest bit over the years. You can see that loom's pretty faded, and there's a few little spots on the hands and on the dial. And you really got to be under macro to see it, because if you're just looking at the watch normally, you don't see it. It just looks beautiful. up real close, we can see that. But using my non-metal tweezers here, that's some sort of weird plastic tips. I forgot what they call those. Darylin maybe, or I don't know, something like that. But just a safe way of handling those hands. But now we can remove the 2 dial feet screws that attach this dial to the movement. Those screws have a shouldered undercut to it, and just squeeze on those dial feet when you tighten the screw. So we're just going to loosen those up. Here comes number 2. And not every time does the dial just immediately pull off. And this one here was like that. It was a little bit stubborn. So I'm just going to use a little gentle wedge action here and go around this watch and just kind of work it loose until it finally comes loose. You'll see some extended shots like this throughout the video. One thing I really try to do in my videos is, show you my little mishaps. Hopefully they're minimized. I try to, but if it's something I get a little clumsy with something, we'll leave it in. Taking a look at this thing, I always look at the back side of the dial, and this is a habit from my Seiko experience, because I'm always looking at date codes on Seikos. Obviously, there's no code on the back of this, but it's always interesting to see the manufacturing process of the dial. And you saw that color matched date wheel, which is just gorgeous. I love it. So here we go. We can begin disassembly of the movement itself. I'm going to start with removing the automatic works off this thing. And there's 3 visible screws on these AS automatic work plates, but it's the 2 on the outside edge that actually attach it to the movement. The center screw actually attaches the 2 plates that comprise the automatic works assembly together. So I'm going to leave that screw in for now. We'll go ahead and lift this assembly up and get that out of the way. I won't bother showing you disassembly of that. I'll show you a reassembly, but one comes right after the other in the process. So I just figured I'd show you the assembly. Now we can hold our click spring back, and I'm releasing all the power we just put into this watch before we put it on the time grapher. Had a full wind in it, but I'm just letting that crown just spin between my fingers, but I'm not letting it spin freely under its own power. I'm kind of restraining it a little bit just so it doesn't go crazy on us. And now we can remove our balance. So we'll go ahead and get this one screw out of the way. And a lot of the plates on this watch were real tight fits, and this balance included. You can see there, it just doesn't want to lift straight off. So, I'll go in here and just very gently, I don't want to scratch this thing by any means. So I'm very gently with the screwdriver, just using that as a little wedge and working it up. And there we go. You saw that balance kind of pop up like that. Now we can go ahead and get this thing removed. There we go. What I like to do is take it over to the microscope. And the first thing I'll do is just check the hairspring just to see if, it's all the rings are, equally spaced apart. You can't really check flatness in here without it really mounted in the watch in its final position. And, truth be told, I did kind of do that when I looked at it earlier, and I'll do it again during assembly, but that spring looked fantastic. So, and you can really tell under that microscope if you got oil or dirt or something, just kind of holding it back. But that one looked great. So working on the front side of the watch here, we're going to begin with some of the calendar works parts. That here is a spring that I think they called the indicator yoke or correcting yoke. It's a part we'll remove later, but when this watch, the date wheel jumps over, it doesn't just gradually change over. It just immediately clicks into place. And that spring is a tension spring on that mechanism that does that work. Here's our intermediate date wheel, and we got a little cam on the back side of that. That's part of that date changeover mechanism. And that's all driven directly out. That's a double-toothed hour wheel right there. So one part of that's going to engage with the minute wheel, and the other is going to engage with that intermediate date wheel. Now we can remove this calendar cover plate. If you take a look around the edges of that, you can see some dirt or gunk, or it's definitely discolored, but there's something going on with that plate. And hopefully that'll all come clean during the wash. I, at this point, did not know if that was permanent or not, but I'm trying to be very careful when I lift this plate up, because the spring for the date jumper and its spring this plate is what retains those. And you can see right there where that arrow is, there they are. And if I'm not careful, if I bump this thing, those things are going to go flying on me. And heaven help me, if I lose them, it probably won't be easy to find. So that's why we're taking it apart here with just some Rodico. And this is that's actually not Rodico. That's some alternative. Someone asked me to try out, told me about it. So it's a few dollars, so I bought a stick of it. There's that part we mentioned earlier. And now I remember it's called an unlocking yoke. But that's part of the calendar mechanism. Now we can take off our date wheel. Just being very careful, holding it in the middle of my tweezers where I'm not pinching on it exactly. I'm just kind of holding it loose in there just to avoid marking that up. Now we can remove this cover plate, holding down our cannon pinion and our minute wheel. And so this is not a directly driven cannon pinion right off the center wheel. This is basically an offset cannon pinion. That is our cannon pinion there, but that is not friction fit. It just kind of sits on that post, and it's going to be driven by a secondary pinion on our third wheel. There's our minute wheel, and that's actually held in place by spring tension. You can probably barely make out that little spring there, and we're going to keep that in place. We don't have to remove that for the purposes of rebuilding this watch. But moving on to the keyless works, this is our setting lever spring. So we're going to go ahead and release tension on that spring, and now we can remove our screw fully and get this thing out of the way. And so that thing acts as a cover plate, holds some things down. It covers the edge of the yoke as well, and just then puts tension on that setting lever for the keyless works operation. Here's our setting wheel, if memory serves. That's what they call it. That's the intermediate wheel, and you can see it's a radius on one side. That wheel acts as an intermediary between the sliding gear and the driving pinion on the third wheel for when you're setting your time. And now we can remove our yoke spring. Very odd shaped yoke spring in this thing. And our yoke. It's funny. Oh, you know what? I guess I realize as I say this, I guess I'm going to let the cat out of the bag, as it were. So I posted a picture of this watch on Instagram. And yes, I do have an Instagram for the channel, and it's actually existed for a while. And I'll be the first to say I am like a preschooler when it comes to social. I don't know how Instagram works. I really don't. I still don't understand the hashtag thing or how, like if I'm supposed to do anything, I don't know. But some people have found the channel, and everyone who's found the channel has found it out of their own effort. I haven't advertised it, told people of its existence. And, a few people started to find it. I said, it's kind of cool. If they found it on their own, it's not, I hadn't said it on the channel yet. And truth be told, in previous videos, I kind of remembered after the fact. But while I was doing the voice work, I hadn't actually mentioned it. And I realized after I posted the video, I was like, well, maybe the next video I'll say something about it. It's kind of been the ongoing joke that eventually I'll mention it. And I'm sure most people know how Instagram works, but I do not. I'm not the social media type, but I'm learning. And so I post pictures on there. Patreon gets, a lot of the inside scoop, but, I'll post a picture on there and show what watch I'm working on or whatever. And I posted a picture of this watch, and someone said, the Croton project is underway. And someone replied back and they said, the Croton project. They said, that sounds like a sci-fi bioweapon. And it made me laugh. I was sitting at my computer by myself, alone, and no one around me, and I actually laughed out loud. I thought that was funny. And I said, man, can I use that for the video title? And so obviously I didn't use it for the video title, but I was like, man, I got to work that into the voice work somehow. So a sci-fi bioweapon. That made me laugh. Thank you. But now the cat is out of the bag. So if you want to take a look at the Instagram page, see what's going on, I post pictures up there before the videos, go live just to show you what I'm working on. And hope to see a bunch of people show up. Everyone who's there right now has found it out of their own search. I haven't mentioned anything about its existence, but I think it may be cool. A lot of people show up there, and we have nerd out and talk about watches and what we're working on, offer me some hints, and I'll try to offer advice where I can as well. So there you go. Hope to see you over there. Okay, now that the cat's out of the bag on the Instagram page, we went ahead and removed our train bridge there, and I'm continually amazed at how good a condition this watch is in. Again, uh, we can go ahead and start disassembly of our trainer wheels. That first wheel we took off was the driving wheel for the crown wheel. It's what interconnects the crown wheel to the automatic works. We took out our fourth wheel or center wheel, and I'm attempting to take out our third wheel. But again, this has those, there's two large pinions on there. One that connects or engages with the mainspring barrel, and the other, which is the driving pinion for the cannon pinion. But they're too big to just pull the wheel straight up. So I need to go ahead and remove the barrel first. So we're just taking the screws out here and just loosening up this barrel bridge. Just kind of breaking the tension, holding this thing down. They're a pretty tight squeeze together. So there we go. That comes out, and it's quite nice. This AS1903 movement's got a jeweled upper mainspring barrel arbor port, which is real great. Now we can go ahead and get our barrel out of the way. Now we can go ahead and remove this second wheel. I may have referred to it as the third wheel earlier when I was talking about the interaction, but with the setting gear and the winding pinion and that. But that is the second wheel with the two driving pinions. Our third wheel also came out there. And I'm going to go ahead and remove the pallet fork before we pop this escape wheel out. It's just, they're barely in the way of one another. And so I just want to go ahead and just to be safe, because I don't have a spare one of these movements lying around. I don't want to break anything. So better safe than sorry. We're going to go ahead and pop this pallet fork bridge off here. And it was a very tight squeeze, but we got that up. Just kind of, and I've always flipped the parts over. And honestly, that's not even me trying to do something for the video. That's just a force of habit. I've always kind of flipped those parts and, check both sides of it and see if I notice anything during disassembly. That's what I've always done long before I ever, started recording any videos. So if you kind of take a look at the process here to separate this barrel lid, that's kind of a Seiko thing. A lot of folks who work on Seikos, they've probably run into those on the S series movements and some of the 7000 series movements, and I'm sure they put them on others. But that's kind of like a cap, almost like a soft drink cap, where it's got a lip that goes around the barrel. It doesn't just sit on it. It's like encompasses it. So you kind of got to be a little bit careful. But I like to use a razor blade and a screwdriver and just be extremely careful and separate it with the razor blade rather than prying it with a screwdriver to avoid damaging any teeth on the barrel. But out comes our barrel arbor, and you can see that little hook there on that arbor where it engages with the mainspring. And if you're going to start working on watches and stuff, a lot of folks contact me, and asking questions. And even now, I've got a lot of them under my belt. For an amateur, I've got a lot of them under my belt. Nowhere near like a professional's level or anything. But the one thing I'm doing there, this is a left-hand wind mainspring. So if you kind of look at the mainspring as it sits in the barrel, what direction would you need in order to tighten the mainspring? And that one would need to turn left to tighten it. So that's how we identify the orientation of that mainspring. Now I'm going to begin just some pre-cleaning, and I'm going to show you the pre-cleaning on this main plate. But I do this for most of the parts, all the bridges and anything with jewels and, cover plates and whatnot. But certain individual parts I won't peg them out, but I'll peg anything really that's a flat surface or anything that's got jewels. Once all that's done, go ahead and put some paper down here, and that's more than just for the camera. It's to dry these parts off after we're done, but that is a jar of naphtha. So we're going to dunk the parts in here, and I'm just going to use a little plastic stick and a little, 5-cent paintbrush, and go ahead and kind of give these things a scrub in the naphtha. And what this will do is any really dried, kicked on grease that I don't get with my pegwood, the pegwood's really just loosening it up. But that'll really get most of it out, because if you're just putting them in a wash or even in an ultrasonic, if it's really caked on, you may need to run it through a few times. This gets the bulk of the big, nasty stuff off and also saves your fluids. Because if you're running a cleaning machine, if you're buying proper fluids for those, that stuff is not cheap. So, and it just kind of gives you a bit of extra security, and your clean just comes out better. It's worth the time investment to pre-clean these parts, because You could do a great job of putting the movement together and oiling it properly and everything else. But, if you miss something, especially in your escapement, or you got a little piece of something on one of the pivots, you're going to see it when you put it on that machine. And it's, you're not going to get the amplitude you want, or it's just something's going to be off. So it's worth the time to really do a proper job cleaning these parts. Speaking of cleaning these parts, this is my Oma cleaning machine. It's the first stage is a wash. The next three are rinses, followed by a drying cycle. And I always find this is, and I'm not the only channel to do this, but this really is the most opportune time to do this. And I really think it's worth it to spend the time and just thank the patrons of this channel for their support. I appreciate y'all so much. JC, our newest member, man, thank you so much for joining. It means an awful lot to me. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so over there. Again, they're the ones who voted on this watch, and I solicit their opinions on things, and I have ideas on how to have more engagement in the future with them. But I'm still learning the whole social media thing, and although Patreon's not really social media, but it kind of is. I don't know, but I just want to say I really appreciate everyone who goes over there and supports the channel. And you don't have to pay to be a member over there. You can go up there and sign up for free and still see a lot of the stuff I post. I make it visible for everyone, not just people who support the channel financially. Just anyone who goes over there gets to see stuff before it comes out. So thank y'all again. We went ahead and got our new mainspring in. As you saw, we got a brand new mainspring put into this thing. I'm just applying a little bit of lubrication, and now we can put our barrel arbor back into place. That one actually slid in pretty nicely. The video makes it look like it's almost loose because it slid in so nice, but that is a good fit in there. Felt nice, and I'm going to put a bit more of that. That's HP 1300 lubricant. That's about a medium viscosity lubricant. And putting that on the lip where the barrel lid's going to sit into place. We'll get that barrel lid there and move it over to our little plastic doodad. Go ahead and snap that down into place. And this one gave a super satisfying snap, but I didn't put the snap in, and people are going to wonder, and I'm just inspecting it here. I didn't leave the audio of the snap into place because I had my TV going on in the background and had Star Trek playing. And I always think like YouTube's going to ding me for some license thing if I have Star Trek playing in the background, because obviously I don't own Star Trek content. You can't have that in your videos or whatever. So that's why I don't put it in there. But I see people doing videos in dead silence, and they're interesting to watch from a viewer perspective, and I get it. I gotta have something going on in the background when I'm doing it. Usually it's the TV. I have something going on. I put a TV on the wall and a little Roku back there, and I just stream stuff. And I have, most of the time I don't even watch it, but I'm in the middle of Star Trek Deep Space Nine right now, which is even fantastic. I wish I had a voice could you imagine Captain Ben Sisko narrating this channel? Man, I just had an epiphany. I need to hire a voice actor. Because man, that guy's got the most smoothest voice ever. He's the most suave captain ever. Sorry. I'm going nerd out on Star Trek. Sorry. If this isn't obvious, I just kind of shoot from the hip on this voiceover stuff. I hope you enjoy it. But got the balance jewels in. You saw that. Everything's lubricated and good to go. So we're going to begin assembly of the movement. So now we're setting our training wheels into place. We got our escape wheel in, our third wheel in. Here comes our second wheel, and we're going to put this in first before we put in the barrel, just so everything kind of goes together a bit more smoothly. And we'll go ahead and stand that into place. Slide in our barrel here from the side. Nice. That was very satisfying, falling right into place. And lastly, we'll go ahead and put in our fourth wheel. And while that wheel was off camera, I went ahead and put a little bit of lubrication there at the base of that where it's going to sit against the main plate. So get that taken care of. And we'll put a dab of lubrication here for this driving gear. The crown wheel driving gear, if memory serves, is what they refer to, but that's the intermediate gear between the crown wheel and the automatic works. And the last thing we do not want to forget is the setting lever screw. So dab of lubrication in there and we'll pop that setting lever screw into place before we put that bridge plate on, because that happens to the best of us. If somebody forgets a part, it's usually that, and then you got to take the bridge plate apart. And it's the train wheel bridge, not the easy barrel bridge like we're doing now. You got to take the train bridge apart and then put it all back together and line all your pivots back up. So thankfully I remembered. Usually, like, I have that thing set up in my parts tray to like do that part absolutely first sometimes, just to make sure I don't forget. I did that one last, but I did not forget it. Now we got our barrel bridge on, screws down, not fully tightened, but they're in. Now we can get our train wheel bridge in. So this is going to be another one of those long, kind of extended video shots. There's zero editing that's going to happen in this thing and coming up. So I put that bridge on, and we're going to go ahead and do a little tapping trick. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't, but this is real time, zero edits. And so that's why you see a long gap here and me fiddling around, grabbing tools and whatnot. But we'll see what this thing does. This is the first test here after the tap trick. The plate's very loose on there. Like normally you got to hold that thing down when you do it, but yes, I will take that. That's a win. So now we can go ahead and get these screws into place, and I'm going to, keep that plate held down to make sure none of those pivots move out of their jewels while I, cinch down one or two screws. Once that's done, I'll go ahead and I check it, and then we'll tighten everything back up, including the two screws on the barrel bridge. Now that that's all done, we'll just check it one more time. And I'm liking it. It's looking good. So before we start putting parts on here, I want to go ahead and lubricate this upper barrel arbor port, because as soon as we put on our ratchet wheel, that does not be, that ability to do that is gone. And every time I do one with a jewel in it like that, I make a mess of it. So clean up the excess oil here. And this little post here is where the click is going to go. So I'll drop this click into place. And after that click is tightened down, we can go ahead and put on our click spring. And if you noticed, I was actually rambling on about something earlier, but if you paid attention when I removed that actually pinged off the watch. It didn't go far, but yeah, that one pinged off, and that was my fault. But here we go. We'll go ahead and put it back in. But the fact that this thing pinged off on me while I was taking it apart was not lost on me when I was putting it back in. So I was taking no chances here. This is there's triple backup on every process I'm doing just to make sure I don't lose that spring, but they always make me nervous. But there we go. Spring's in place. And I want to add a little dab of grease here where that spring is getting to interact, because that click and that spring are going to be going bonkers all the time, contacting one another. So we'll add a little bit of lubrication in there and clean that up. Here's another one of those edits where sometimes the part install doesn't go perfect. I got the ratchet wheel keyed onto the barrel arbor, but it's not engaged with the click yet. And I got to push that click kind of out of the way a little bit. Right now it's sitting on top of the click teeth. I need to move that click back. There we go. Now you see where it dropped into place when I moved that click out of the way. So sometimes you got to fiddle with them a little bit to get them going, but there we go. Ratchet wheel's in place, and I always just kind of give it a turn there when I do it and just kind of spin the gear train. Everything's looking good. Now we can put on our crown wheel. And the first thing we do when this crown wheel's got a bushing on it, you may notice that you don't see those all too often, but occasionally, like those Seiko movements have those bushings around the column wheel on those chronographs on those 61, 38, and 39s. Same concept. Lubrication goes in, the bushing goes in, a little bit more, one more dab of it. That's HP 1300. We can go ahead and drop in our crown wheel, and that is a reverse threaded screw on that. So we get that tightened down by turning it to the left. Now we can put in our pallet fork. This is very delicate work, and I'm a lefty. So you can obviously see I'm using my left hand to do this, but my cameras are in front of it, and on the right-hand side, there's literally no good camera angle when I'm doing it. Like, that's about the best you can do. But even there, like if I'm putting in the pallet fork, you can't see it. So we're kind of stuck with that microscope footage there. Not as good a quality as this, but we get the idea of what's going on. But that's a real tight squeeze. So I'm just making sure that that pivots down there. And now that I know it is, I'm going to just go ahead and cinch that down with my tool here and make sure that plate's down all the way into place. But now we can turn this thing around where the camera can see it. We get that screw tightened up, and now we can put in a little bit of a wind in this thing. I don't do a full wind. I don't even do a quarter of a wind. I just do 3 or 4, 5 turns, something like that. And then check the action of the pallet with that minimal amount of power wound up in the watch. And that's looking really good. So now I'm going to show this process once, but I repeat it 3 times. Very difficult to film. That's so zoomed in. It's silly. But the tiniest bit of escapement lubrication on the face of that exit stone, and we're going to apply that to 5 teeth on the escape wheel at a time. Repeat that process 2 more times, and now we can install the balance. I went ahead and I actually got a bunch of good feedback from y'all. Thank you. A lot of people seem to like that picture-in-a-picture thing. So, you know, what you see on the top left is my view through the microscope, zoomed all the way out. And that's usually what I'm looking at when we're putting in balances. And so a lot of people seem to like it. So I went ahead and threw it in here again. You can see a little bit of silhouetting on that screen. That's just because I got a real cheap junk camera on that microscope. But you usually have to zoom that footage in a little bit to get rid of that. And that's what you normally see. But zoomed all the way out, that's what we're stuck with. But if you get folks like that, I'll keep working on improving that and try to include it more and more. But I'll tell you what, this thing fired right up. That balance is engaged and excited. So now we can go ahead and start lubricating this train of wheels on both sides. So there we go. There's our third wheel. That's our escape wheel. That's our third wheel. That's our fourth wheel. And there's that spring that holds that minute wheel that we mentioned earlier, and our escape wheel on that side. Lastly, we can go ahead and throw some lubrication on this bottom barrel arbor port. And that's a combination of HP 1300 and 9010, depending upon which pieces are being lubricated. So at this point, this watch had been running for about 24 to 30 hours. I don't remember exactly how long. 24, a little over a day. Not final regulation by any means. Amplitude will kind of bump up a little bit. It always seems to be low for the first few seconds when you put it on the time grapher, but we stay in the 250s, 260s. It's keeping real steady time. Our escapement lubrication's on point. Bead air is great. Yeah, it's just looking great. So we'll let this run in several more days, and that amp, you know, those numbers will change. It will require some, you know, tweaking again. It won't stay that consistent. I mean, that rate will change over time. And if we check it in a couple days, didn't touch it, it may be keeping 5 or 10 seconds different time. We'll just make tiny little adjustments and just adjust that regulation over the next couple days. So while that's going on, we can go ahead and begin putting together the dial side of this movement. So the first thing we're going to do is install our keyless works. So that's the winding pinion on the left and our sliding clutch on the right. We're applying some heavy grease to the mating points of those, not a lot. And generally, I had a tendency to over grease those. So I was very aware when I was doing that. It requires less than I was using before, even though I was cleaning up the excess. But there we go. And OCD requires me to fiddle with it until I see those teeth mesh. It's not like they wouldn't, but there we go. And applying more of that same grease to the stem at a few different points. And then on all 4 points of those flats where it's going to engage in that winding gear and sliding clutch. And then just a little bit on the tip as well. But now we can get that put into place. And I can go ahead and tighten that setting lever screw all the way down. And there we go. Now that stem's not going to go anywhere. A little bit of grease in that channel there for where the yoke is going to sit. And some 1300, HP 1300 on the post for the yoke. And we can install our yoke. That drops down into place. Next thing we can do is install our yoke spring. So I'm going to apply a little bit of grease here at a few different points. Uh, Against the main plate right here and against the other side of the yoke where that's going to sit. And while I've got the grease on the oiler, I'm going to go ahead and grease where the setting lever and the yoke are going to engage at a few points here as well. Not too worried about making a big mess here. That all gets cleaned up after the parts get assembled. Go over it with Rodico and all that stuff on top of the parts and everything that kind of squeezes out. We clean all that up. So it just leaves a film of that heavy grease right on the contact points. Now we're going and getting our spring kind of set into place. It's got a very unique shape. We'll hold it down here and set that in. That unique shape doesn't make it actually quite easy to install. I will give them that. And I was just thinking, on my last video on the Bulova or Bulova, I think it's Bulova. Two things. One, some people said I mispronounced it. I actually went to Google before I made that video and Googled, how to pronounce it. And I believe it said it's Bulova. And I probably said Bulova a few times in that video. But one thing I had in that video, this movement holder I'm using that you see here, I had there. What this is, technically it is a movement holder, but it's what it's designed for. They asked me what it was because it was the first time I'd showed it on the channel. But this thing, it's actually meant just to hold the watch when you're setting hands. They're specific to one size. These basically the diameter of these main plates and all, they're in lengths called lines. And this one is an 11.5 line movement holder, and there's a stud, an adjustable stud you can raise up and down on the back side of this that you would use to support the jewel for the center wheel. So when you're pressing in your seconds hand and whatnot, you don't accidentally push that jewel if you put too much force on the watch. This particular watch didn't really fit in the main movement holder. I like when it's dial side up, it was getting a little too close to that spinning balance wheel for my comfort level. So although it does kind of jiggle around a little bit in this thing, it's actually quite nice to use this just even for assembly. I've only got 2 of these and they're not necessarily inexpensive. They're like 30 something dollars. But the Bulova and this Croton, this AS movement fit the 11.5. So I haven't used these very often, but I kind of like it. So I'm using it as a movement holder, really, when doing the dial side assembly of the watch. So this is actually just a holder for setting hands is what they sell them for, but you can use it for this as well. If you don't mind it kind of spinning just side to side, just a few degrees, but that doesn't really bother me. And it's a lot easier to kind of hold it with your off hand and, steady it while you're using your main hand to do tools and whatnot. But I like it. So hopefully that answers that. And we're assembling the rest of the calendar works here. We're going to go ahead and get this date jumper put into place. I'll put the spring on afterwards, after the date wheel is on. But there's our date jumper. Now that that's in place, I'm going to apply just a little bit of lubrication right there at the corner. And it's just going to lubricate that teeth and let it just glide over the teeth of that date wheel a little bit easier. And I only want the teeth on the edge of that, so I'm using Rodico and just kind of cleaning it off the top. I'm going to do the same thing over here. And just right on the tip of that thing. Now we can put on our date wheel. And I love the color match. I like it when the date wheels are color matched to the dial. And this is such a unique, glossy, deep red dial. And the fact they did the same treatment to the date wheel, I think it looks fantastic. So just kind of lining everything up. And I'm going to get that jumper and everything set between 2 teeth. And I'm going to lubricate just a few points here where that jumper is going to engage against the main plate and on the back side of that date jumper, and we can get our spring into place. And you can see my follies trying to install this thing, if memory serves. Yep. So I'm going to use my hold down tool to kind of set this thing into place and try to keep it from moving around on me. And yep, boom, right there. So take two. We'll try this again. All right, one side. There's the other side. And I notice right here, I made a little bit of a mess when I applied that oil to the date jumper where the spring is going to contact us. I'm just going to hold both of those down and clean up that little spot. And I even do that when I'm off camera too. It's a good and yet terrible hobby to have if you have OCD like I do. But it even if no one ever sees it except you, you know it's done right. So it looks like, yep, all of our discoloration, everything cleaned up quite nicely. The naphtha pre-cleaning solution really did a number on whatever gunk that was and cleaned up that part very nicely. And you saw that sit down into place. So this is held on by 2 screws. So just get both of them down, barely snug, and we'll go ahead and tighten them both up. Now we can put on our hour wheel. So I'm applying a bit of HP 1300 on the outside of that hour wheel, and we can, on the outside of the cannon pinion, we can drop the hour wheel into place. Make sure it's engaged with the pinion on that minute wheel. And now we can put on our intermediate calendar wheel, and you can see that pawl, or that, that little arm on the underside of that. I'm placing that in an orientation where it's not engaging with that calendar part, it's away from it. So that way when we start to turn it, it'll attack that part from the correct direction, and we'll be good. Now we could put on our spring. So just like most of the others, I'm going to go ahead and get this screw just started, not tightened down all the way. We can go ahead and apply some grease to the spring. And I don't notice something at first here. I'm going to go ahead and pop this spring into place. And it's actually sitting on top of the part I need it to sit against. So tightening the screw down all the way. I'm going to kind of push that pawl back a little bit, or that yoke back a little bit. There we go. Now that spring's sitting properly. And I'm just giving it a test. And if you see that little circle in the middle of that intermediate date wheel, that's an indicator of where that arm is on the underside of it. And right as it finishes engaging that part, boom, you can see that instant changeover on the date. And that's what we're looking for. So, okay, here comes the dial. Go ahead and get that popped into place. One thing I didn't show on camera, but I tighten the dial feet screws after I remove it, just to make sure they don't kind of come loose during the cleaning or any other part of the process. And then I'll loosen them right before the stage, right before it's time to put the dial back on. So we got the dial back on, and we'll go ahead and tighten these screws back up, and you'll feel the shoulder on that screw squeeze against that dial foot. And I'm just going to use some Rodico and very gently just clean up anything I can. And this is just one shot of a couple. I actually did the same thing. I went over the indices and very gently. And then lastly, I'm trying to clean up what I can on these hands. These hands actually did clean up quite nicely. I have a brush from Bergeon, and everything they sell is expensive. And that little 10 cents worth of Rodico does a better job than that $35 brush. But that cleaned up a lot of the little markings on that, but it was still safe. Didn't damage any of the original loom. So I was very pleased with that. But now I'm just trying to straighten up these hands a little bit, and I want to get this hour hand started just kind of straight on there. Not really pressed down, but just kind of straight up and down on it. There we go. Now this is where this movement tool comes in handy, because it's the exact correct diameter to fit in my little press. And we'll go ahead and press that down into place. And I want to get that hand pressed down just about at the same depth as the top of the hour wheel. And here comes the minute hand. Press that down about to the same depth as the top of the cannon pinion. One more for good measure. You can see that hand flexing just a little bit. These hands are a real tight squeeze on there. And now the second hand. And this is extremely light pressure. Even just the the touch, just a whisper of a touch will stop that second sand. So it's not an issue that it stops while you're pressing it on. It's not hurting anything. So here's the crystal. And, kind of under close inspection, this thing's got, there's quite a bit of scratches. And that big gash you see there's right dead center on that crystal. And from the side, you can see how deep that is into the side of that crystal. So I want to see if we can salvage this thing. Wasn't really sure at this point, but we're going to go ahead and pull out the tension ring on that. And the inside of that tension ring has got a polish on it. And that's that, chrome trim you see around the edge of the dial, but also pushes outwards and provides tension on that crystal against the case. So what we're going to do here, I have a stitched mop, stitched cotton mop. I'm going to use some white Dialux pretty gently. I'm not pressing hard or anything. And I'm going to use this to kind of go over and get the rough stuff buffed out as best I can. And because what we're going to have to do, if we're going to get that big chunk out of the middle of this thing, we're going to have to basically bring the surface level of everything around it to the same level as the deepest part of that gash if we're going to make it go away. So what this is, this is not aggressive, but it's aggressive for this crystal, but it's not a super aggressive compound. But you can just see me kind of working it a little bit. And I wanted to kind of take a break at this point here with this white. I cleaned it up a little bit and we'll take a look and see, and we'll put an arrow. You can see where the light's reflecting. There's still a little bit of that little center spot left, but you can see how much of those other scratches just that white Dialux really took care of. So I'm going to go ahead and move over to the red Dialux. This is very soft. This compound is like for precious metals, for gold and stuff like that. Very non-aggressive, and it's a very soft wheel that I'm using. So we're going to go ahead and just buff this a little bit more. I'm just kind of rotating it around the edges a little bit. I'll go in a bit deeper towards the center of the crystal and just kind of work it and just kind of see where we come up with. And this will get rid of some of the finer scratches that the white Dialux left, didn't do. And you can still see it's less than it was before, but there is just the tiniest amount left. So I'm squeezing every last drop of polywatch out of that tube. I've got my money's worth out of that tube. I'm squeezing that thing for dear life, but that's polywatch. And so it's basically it's a very fine compound. I forgot, it's akin to what, like 5,000 grit diamond paste, somewhere around there. This is, I'm going to do this process a few times and I can really focus on the middle of that crystal. I'm just going to show one kind of pass, but I'm using just a kind of a little lint-free towel there, and I clean all that up best I can. Did a couple passes of that, put the tension, cleaned everything back up, put the tension ring back in, and now we're going to go ahead and press this crystal back into this case. And so this was an odd size crystal. It was kind of size-wise, it was between two of my dies. So I'm using the smaller of the two dies and just working it around a little bit. And that's why I'm taking some extra time here. But everything worked out. I looked at it from the inside of the case and it's seated down all the way. So crystal's in good shape. I'm really, really pleased with it. Now we can go ahead and recase this watch. And again, that watch, it's very deep in there. It almost kind of, and almost, I hate to say it because it sounds awful, but it almost has to fall into it because it sits so deep. But you can see that's not right. It's kind of sitting off and I'm heart's pounding at the moment. I'm like, man, is it sitting, bending a hand or something? So we'll kind of adjust it. There we go. Now we got that thing in the case. It's still the crown tube and the crown insert are a little bit off, but it's sitting in there flat. So we'll just rotate it around a little bit and line those up so we can put the stem in. That's close enough. So now I'm going to go ahead and pop this stem into place. And I haven't even turned the watch over yet to make sure none of the hands got damaged or anything, just because it kind of went in a little sideways. But once I get everything kind of locked down, I flip it over and everything's fine. It didn't even come close to touching, but it's always a concern. It's like when we worked on that Zodiac astrographic a long time ago, I had the same kind of issue with that one. But there we go. We got the screw tightened down. stem is not going to go anywhere. We can get this movement ring back into place. And and folks, just look at this case. This watch is probably a few decades old. Uh, you know, it's ridiculous how good a shape this is in. I didn't repolish this case or anything. You can see there when you see the outside of the case. It's not perfect, but it's pretty darn good. So now we're going to go ahead and install this automatic works because we're ready for that. So I did it in a very, I guess, if I'm going to be honest about it, a kind of a clumsy manner, but I kept it in the video. In hindsight, if I think about it again, I could have put this together in a quarter of the amount of time had I done it in the proper order. But first thing we do is we just put on our 2 springs here. One of them is for the reverser, the other's for the click. The reverser springs up top. And now I'm trying to put in the reverser, and this is my mistake. I should have put the reduction gear in first and not this reverser, because the spring has to sit on top of that reverser. So, but what I'm doing here is I'm just trying to hold the spring back a little bit so I can get this reverser into place. And there we go. And then I'm just going to take all that work and just throw it in the trash can here in about 3 seconds because the reduction gear needs to go in. And so I got to push that back and rest the teeth of the reverser against the reduction gear. And boom, there you go. All my work down the tubes. So put the reduction gear in first, then pull your spring back and put in the reverser. Just like this. And I did put a dab of oil on the reverser where the spring contacts it. And I did the same for the click off camera, but that's what it should look like. Here comes the click. And so this automatic works is it's a single direction winding. So when the rotor rotates one way, it'll wind the watch. When it rotates the other way, it will not wind the watch. And so that's what that reverser up top is what that rotor actually engages with. But I'm trying to be extremely, because everything's under spring tension without a cover. So I'm nervous. So I'm just trying to get this thing lined up directly over that thing just so I can, at least part of it came together. Okay, cool. But I don't want to lose any of those springs. But my reduction gear's not in that top, pivot's not in its top, it's not a jewel. It's more of a bushing, but it's not in there. The good news is that it's just a hole on the other side of the plate, so you can move that wheel around, but there we go. You can see that pivot poking through there. Excellent. So now I can go ahead and just pop this other screw in and go ahead and get that cinched down. And with that one screw in, that holds those 2 plates together. So now this thing's not going to come apart. I'll go ahead and clean this up a little bit. But what we could do to test this thing is, see, I can turn this gear one way and that's fine, but it won't go the other way. So this click is what's stopping it from going the other way. So when the rotor turns one way, it's going to push that reverser inwards towards that gear and it'll spin. When it pushes the other way, it pushes that reverser away from the gear. And so it doesn't spin, and that click keeps that, reduction gear in place so it can't, nothing unwinds. But everything's oiled in there. We're going to oil that pivot there on that gear, and now we can put this thing in a watch. And those are not terribly, the first time I did one, and it's been a few months actually since I worked on one of these that had a automatic works like this, so I kind of forgot, but they're actually not difficult. If you take it apart and put it together the first time, you may struggle with it, and if you immediately take it apart again, you'll do it in 1/5 the amount of time the second time. They're not difficult. But we got that put on, and then we wound it a little bit to make sure all the teeth mesh on everything, and we're good there. So I can go ahead and tighten these 2 screws that hold this automatic works assembly in the watch. There we go. Now I'm just going to give it a few winds and just make sure everything's happy. It feels real good. I can see that reduction gear turning. So everything up to that point is looking good. So we're going to apply a little bit of lubrication here to this post. And now we can install our rotor or oscillating weight. And there's a gear on that it's going to engage with the reverser in that automatic works. So we pop it on the post there and just kind of spin it around a little bit. It drops down into place. Beautiful. So I don't know if you caught it there, and you'll see it when I spin it after we get this in. There's a little clip that slides between that gear and the rotor itself, and screws in there, and it's just going to hold that rotor down. But when I spin the rotor afterwards, watch the reduction gear. When I spin it in one direction, you'll see it turning, and when it's turning, it's winding the watch. And when I spin it, the rotor in the opposite direction, that gear won't budge an inch. And so this watch is only going to wind in one direction. See, it's turning when we turn when we go clockwise, that gear just stays still. Now it starts turning again. So that is correct on this. And a lot of watches have that, the unidirectional winding. So now we can go ahead and pop in our case back. I don't know if you saw, but we did put in a new gasket in that case. So we got a brand new gasket in there. And I don't know if you just caught that, but that little sticker, we put that thing through the ultrasonic to really give this case a clean, but that original sticker, part of it's hanging on for dear life. And I was curious what I was going to do with it. So some of you folks may not like this. I was on the fence about it, but I said, you know what? When they really someone starts wearing this watch, even if it's me, that's going to come off. So at this point, I'm like, you know what? That sticker's had a good life. Off it comes. But I was I'm holding back a little bit because I don't want to take the whole thing. There's parts of that sticker that are still on there firmly. They're not, I don't want to force it off. So anything that wants to come off, anything that's loose, I'm going to go ahead and just get off. There's a little bit of piece there that wants to come up. I'm going to use some tweezers here and just pick off whatever wants to come up here. And although it looks a little funky, at least I know, and it's on video for the sake of being documented, but that is the original sticker. And look how gorgeous that case back is. Basically, it's brand new. So we'll put the original bracelet back on it first here. My buddy Darren saw this, and he agreed. He's like, you know what? That bracelet actually looks good on that watch. And I agree. I think it really does. I think it looks great, but that bracelet is a bit small for me. So what I did is I put it on a strap I had. This strap here, I've had for a few months. I ordered it, and you can see how well this watch is running now. It's amazing. I ordered it. It's going to be for my own personal Seiko Bruce Lee Pogue project that I just haven't got to, but I decided to put it on this watch. I think it looks fantastic. This is a V-green strap. If you're interested in it, they make quality handmade straps. You can get 15% off by using the code Weekend Watch Repair. It's good for about 40 to 45 more days on that code. Great company, great folks. Thanks again for the code. But ladies and gentlemen, that is the video. I sure do appreciate you stopping by. I hope you enjoyed the video. This watch turned out not to be a sci-fi bioweapon after all. It is just a quirky, cool little weird watch. So I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe if you did, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.